I'm sure this will elicit a gasp from the Bible bowlers. Genesis 26. That's where we're starting today. That's terra incognito, isn't it? Genesis 26. I hope everybody got to bed early last night so you didn't miss out any sleep. But we're glad you're here bright and early. This is a cold morning, but we're glad that you're out. Please be careful out there in the parking lot. I think it's pretty rough, even in the icy spots, but still be careful. There's a few slick spots out there. We're in Genesis 26. We'll begin with the first verse. Before we do, let's bow our heads for a word of opening prayer. Dear Father God in heaven, we thank you for another Lord's Day morning, for this opportunity we have to come together and study from your word. We ask you bless this our Bible study, and that we might glean from your word the things we stand in need of, that we might be better servants of yours, and help us to always apply those things to our lives and our hearts, that we might be better fitted for you. We ask that you'll bless the congregation here in every effort that we put forth, that we may complete your work and do your work in this world, and that many souls would be added to your kingdom. We ask you bless also the sick of our number, those unable to be out, those who are shut in at home, and that you would encourage them and strengthen them. And if it be your will, restore them to the portion of health that they need, that they may be able to come back out once more and be with us. Forgive us of our wrongs and bless us in life. Save us in death is our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. I also should mention that at least for right now, we don't have any water in the building. We do have a leak, and that's been shut off. It's supposed to be in the progress. Got it on? Okay. Charlie got it on again. Amazing guy there. Well, we got the water back on again. All right, so disregard what I just said. For now, anyway. Okay, verse 1. Now, we're starting to take over with Isaac here now from Abraham. And Abraham, we've already read about Abraham's death, but Abraham is still living up until Jacob and Esau are born. In fact, with Jacob and Esau being born when Isaac is 60, that makes Abraham 160. So he's got another 15 years. We just don't read any more about him because now the torch has been basically passed from Abraham to Isaac. And this is going to be passed down the line to Jacob and to the patriarchs and to Israel and to the kings, all the way down when David becomes king. And then you're going to follow the line of David all the way up to finally we get to Christ. And that's what this is all about anyway, isn't it? It's all about the plan of redemption. We see that unfolding. We see it coming about in the Old Testament. But Isaac is going to be the focal point here. And there was a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Ghirar. Now, this is the first time it's mentioned, although it's kind of hinted that Abimelech and the Philistines are associated with each other. Here, we see that he is the king of the Philistines. Now, is this the same Abimelech? Maybe, maybe not. The word Abimelech may just simply be a word used, a title that's used for the ruler of the people. And so here he is denoted as the king of the Philistines. And we have Isaac going down to Ghirar, just like his father Abraham had done. And similar things are about to happen, as happened in the days of Abraham. And the Lord appeared unto him, that is to Isaac, and said, Go not down into Egypt. Dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and I will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. There are several things that stand out in this. All three of the patriarchs in the land of Canaan were given, because of a famine, they were given the option, we would say, to go down to Egypt. Except in Isaac's case, God specifically commands him not to go down. Abraham, of course, did go down to Egypt, got into trouble down there. And then Jacob went down to Egypt because of the famine and because his son Joseph was down there. But Isaac, he's making his way in that direction. If he's down from Beer Lahai, where he was dwelling before, and now he's going down to the south, perhaps going to Egypt in order to receive relief from the famine. Why go to Egypt, by the way? Why would that be a good place to go? Plenty of food. Why would there be food in the land of Egypt and not elsewhere? Storehouses. What else is there? Okay, it's part of the Fertile Crescent. All right. So is the Middle East in a sense. You got Mesopotamia just kind of winds on down that way. That's why it's called a crescent. Goes up into the land of Haran. Okay, comes down around. It actually goes down in, and it's even including the Nile River Valley. And I'm just giving you a great big hint as why there would be food. Oh, yes, the Nile River. Okay, very fertile valley. Every year, still to this day, the Nile River floods its banks in the spring. And it deposits all the minerals and everything out onto the land. And then as it recedes, the land is well watered and it's well fertilized and it produces great crops. And always has. It's always been that way. All right. So when everyone else was out of food, guess where you go? Go down to Egypt. So it appears that Isaac is thinking about doing that very thing. But God tells him not to. Why is it that God tells Isaac not to go? Abraham was given the choice to go, and even Jacob was commanded to go down to Egypt. Why the difference here? I thought God was the same. He doesn't give one command to one and one to another, does he? Well, when it comes to the unchangeable, the morals, yes, he does give one command. But here is what we're talking about, situations, and we're talking about what needs to be done, and the people that are involved. I think it's also true. I like Dehoff's comments on this. He says, there was a famine in Jacob's day. God told him, go down to Egypt. That's in chapter 46. In Isaac's days, God bade him not go down. A famine in Abraham's days, and God left it up to him. It was up to his own choice. He could do what he wanted to. All right. This variety, he says, of the divine procedure seems to be grounded upon the different characters of these three men. And at least that's one good explanation. Abraham was a man of high attainments and intimate communion with God. In all places and conditions, it was alike. No matter where Abraham was, he wasn't going to be tempted. He is going to be unswerving in his faith to God. Isaac, on the other hand, was a very good man, but not cut out for the hardships that Abraham and Jacob seemed to be. Therefore, he's forbidden to go to Egypt. Jacob was accustomed to hardships, difficulties, strong and patient, and therefore must go down to Egypt. You see the difference in these things? Now, I like what Dehoff uses is a phrase here that I think applies. It says, God tempers the wind to the shorn lamb. I like that statement. Did you ever think about that? When the sheep is shorn and has no protection, God tempers the wind. Seems to protect, protecting the one who is the most vulnerable here. And it may have been that that's the reason why God says, I'll be with you. You stay here in this land. I'll make sure you have enough. I'll make sure you have enough to eat. You won't starve. You stay here. I don't want you going down to Egypt. So it may have been that for this very reason, God tells him you stay here. 1 Corinthians 10:13 comes to mind. God will not allow us to be tempted above that we are able. Okay? I think that there's a lot to be said about that. Someone else might be able to handle it, and we might not, or vice versa. And so it may very well be that's the reason why Isaac's told don't go down to Egypt. There's a difference in the characters of the three. Mary Lou? It could be too. Yeah, he might have gone down there and got cut off real quick. It might have been the end of it. And we don't know. We don't know what the reasons are, but there does seem to be a little bit of a difference with Isaac, Abraham, and Jacob in how they deal with people and how they're uh, able to deal with certain situations. Abraham is a lot tougher, it seems like. Able to, when the kings come down from the north and they take Lot captive. Again, 5 kings weren't able to defeat the 4 kings from the north, were they? But Abraham gets the pluck up and goes out and gets these 318 men, joins with the people of the land. Remember Mamre and his brothers. I don't know, maybe some of their people went along too. I don't know. But Abraham's 318, and they go after these kings, and they're able to defeat them and bring Lot back and all the possessions. Okay, this is the kind of man Abraham is. We don't see Isaac doing much of that kind of stuff. All right, now granted, we got a lot more details about Abraham than we do Isaac. Isaac's just kind of a blip on the radar here. We see a few things about him, but they go really from Abraham, and then this is kind of like the middle movie and the sequel, right? And then the third one, and the trilogy that winds it up is Jacob, okay? A lot more details about Abraham and Jacob than we have about Isaac. He's kind of like the bridge between the two. Still, he's a good man. We're going to see some good things about him here. Okay, so he's told, sojourn in this land. This is the land I'm going to give you. I want you to stay here, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. When did God swear to Abraham? When did he perform an oath? Shortly after he did what? After Abraham did what? He went down to, I'll give you a hint, down to the land of Moriah to do this. Oh, offer Isaac as a sacrifice, okay? And after he had done this, and God, of course, stopped him, the angel of the Lord comes to him and stops him from doing this, then he swears this oath to him. And who did he swear by? By himself. Why not somebody else? There isn't anyone greater, is there? Okay, because it says, and then Hebrew writer brings this out too, for invariably men swear, invariably they swear by the greater. They call attention to something greater than themselves in order to perform an oath or to swear something. God, because there was no one greater, swore by himself. Okay? There is none beside him, is there? There's no one greater than God. There's not even anyone equal to God. So he swears to himself or by himself. All right, so he says, I will perform this oath. I will give you this land. Again, Isaac's not going to be given the land per se, but his seed will. His offspring will. And yet God's still going to bless him, as we're going to see here in just a little bit. In verse 4, and I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. There's the Abrahamic promise again, isn't it? All right, there's only 3. Why isn't there 4? Isaac is the first promise, isn't he? I'll give you a son, Abraham. All right, now he says, I'm going to make you like the stars of the heaven. I'm going to make a great nation of you. I'm going to give you this country. And I'm going to bless the entire world through your seed. He only gets 3 because he himself is the 4th one, isn't he? He is the one that Abraham was told, I'll give you a son, and we'll go from there. Okay, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge and commandments, my statutes, and my laws. It's all obedience, isn't it? Isn't that where it's at? Okay, you read in the New Testament. Some people will take this. They'll read this. They'll say Abraham believed God, and it was imputed or accounted unto him as righteousness. So see, that's all we need to do is believe. But how do we know that Abraham believed? Okay, he did something, didn't he? He did something. We read again in Hebrews 11. What does he say about that? By faith, Abraham offered Isaac. You see, by faith, Abraham sojourned in a land. He did something by faith. Okay, and then James talks about faith and works too in James chapter 2, and he mentions Abraham as being one. Paul uses the same example of Abraham believing God and it being imputed to him by righteousness. But we also, James points out, yes, but by those works that he did, the works that he did show us that he had the faith. And so Paul and James are not at odds with each other, are they? They're saying the same thing, just to different people and for different reasons. Paul, in writing to the Romans, for example, and especially Roman Jews, is trying to tell them that you're not going to be saved by the works of the law. So therefore, the law has been done away. It's in the past. You're to live by faith. And so he's really emphasizing the faith part of it. But it's understood. They understand that there's something that must be done. If you have faith in God, it means you're going to obey his voice. It's just that he's telling them about works. No, it's not of works, lest any man should boast. No, we shouldn't. That's talking about works of the law, isn't it? It's the works of the law that he's concerned about. All right, so here we have Abraham, Isaac, we have Jacob. Isaac now is who we're reading about. And Isaac is being given this same promise that Abraham was given. Now, verse 6 says, and Isaac dwelt in Ghirar. Why in Ghirar? Because God said, don't go to Egypt. That's as far as he got. Now, Abraham dwelt there for a while too, didn't he? Maybe the same Abimelech, maybe another Abimelech, all right, but in that same general area. And similarly, something's going to happen in Ghirar like it did to Abraham. Notice this. And the men of the place asked him of his wife, and he said, she is my sister, for he feared to say, she is my wife, lest, said he, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon. Well, Abraham and Isaac must have had similar taste in ladies, because they picked some real lookers, didn't they? Okay. Sarah, even in her late years, was still very beautiful to behold and was someone that was to be desired. The princes of Pharaoh, when he went down to Egypt, that's how Abraham got into trouble in Egypt, by the way. The princes of Pharaoh came and commended her to Pharaoh. Said, she's a beautiful woman and she's his sister, so she's available, basically. Well, here you have Isaac saying this. Now, there is a difference, though. Abraham could say to Abimelech, well, really, she is my sister. How about Isaac? That's stretching it a bit. She was a second cousin, all right, but not sister, all right, because Abraham even points this out to Abimelech, that she is the daughter of my father, just not of my mother. So they had different mothers, but they had the same father. But in the case of Isaac, is she kin? Yes. But it's really stretching it to say she is my sister, like brother and sister, siblings. But this is what Isaac does, and apparently he got this idea from Dad. You don't think they're paying attention, do you? They are. They are. They're watching Mom and Dad. They're watching Grandma and Grandpa. They are watching. So be careful what example you give to them. And it came to pass when he had been there a long time that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah, his wife. That word sporting has to do with laughing, playing, okay? Nothing terrible, nothing awful. It's just something that Abimelech noticed between the two of them, that they were definitely not brother and sister. What does it say? Endearment. There was an endearment between them. You can tell, all right? Abimelech looked out and said, this is not brother and sister here. All right, we know that. We understand what that means. That these two are romantically attracted to each other. They're not brother and sister, not siblings. This is husband and wife here. And he knows this. He sees this. And Abimelech called Isaac and said, behold, of a surety she is thy wife. And how saidest thou, she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, because I said, lest I die for her. I might be put to death. They might kill me and take her because she's a beautiful woman. Abraham had the same fears. It's also, I think, of note, remember God said he would protect him and be with him. This might have been a little lapse in Isaac's faith. And I'm not saying that to be mean. I mean, we all have lapses, don't we? We all have doubts. We all have our moments. And here's where Isaac should have been a little more faithful. But you could argue Abraham could have been a little more faithful too with this regard. You know, he said, surely the fear of God's not in this place, he told Abimelech before. Probably an ancestor of this Abimelech, or maybe the same one. We don't know. We're not told. But Abraham, or maybe this Abimelech, maybe if it is the same Abimelech, he knows to watch for this sort of thing because of what Abraham did. All right, so now Isaac's trying the same thing. Again, Abraham could have been accused of telling a half-truth, but poor old Isaac, no, not at all. That's a bit of a stretch. Second cousin is not sister, okay? But at any rate, he does deceive or attempt to deceive Abimelech and his people. And Abimelech said, what is this that thou hast done unto us? One of the people might lightly have lied with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. Okay, that's true. He's telling Isaac properly here. Now, it's interesting to note that this is a man who's the king of the Philistines. Now, when you think about Philistines in the Old Testament, generally their history during especially the time of Israel coming to the land of Canaan, they are wicked, wicked people. But here you have a man who is reprimanding one of God's people, God's chosen people, Isaac, for doing wrong, and he's right. Abimelech is right about this. You shouldn't have done this. What if one of my guys out here had taken her as a wife? What if he had taken her and even maybe not made her his wife, but took her to himself? Then that would have been, you'd have brought sin upon us. You'd have brought judgment upon us because she's your wife. Why did you do this thing? Okay? And Abimelech said, what is this that thou hast done? Verse 11, Abimelech charged all his people, saying, he that toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Don't touch him. It's amazing that Abimelech, whether the same one or a descendant of the first Abimelech that we read about with Abraham, he has some kind of knowledge of God. He has some kind of moral scruples here, we're of course very much lacking of the Philistines later on. But at this point in time, at the very least, you've got a man here who has moral principles and insists on doing what's right. He does fear God, doesn't he? To some extent, at least. Now, maybe he's also an idol worshiper too, but he has some understanding, some knowledge of God here to do this. He says, I don't want you to bring guiltiness upon us. Guiltiness, well, why would you worry about guiltiness unless you acknowledge that there is a supreme God in heaven? Why worry about guiltiness, right? Because there's going to be consequences for that, for doing something that's wrong, so terrible. So he charges all his people, you don't touch this man, you don't touch his wife, you'll be put to death if you do so. Okay, now remember, God told Isaac, I'm going to prosper you. I'm going to take care of you in the land. Don't go down to Egypt for the famine. Now notice what happens in verse 12. Then Isaac sowed in that land and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. Well, that's pretty good. If you plant whatever it is, grain or whatever it is that you're planting, and you receive 100-fold, that's pretty good windfall, would you say? All right, if you get 10-fold, that's pretty good. But Isaac receives 100-fold, so it's obvious that God's blessing him. Now, maybe someone like Abimelech or even Laban would realize this and recognize, hey, this man's blessed. You better leave him alone, better take care of him, treat him with kid gloves, because we'll receive some of the fringe benefits of this, the crumbs that fall from the table at least, because this man is being blessed by God. Leave him alone. Be nice to him. That's the kind of a person that Laban was when Jacob was up there. And Abimelech also received. They were blessed by him, by Abraham being there. And so was Mamre and several others of the land, realizing that, hey, Abraham, how about the sons of Heth, the Hittites? Hey, you're a prince of God among us. You can use any of the choicest of our tombs to bury your dead. You don't have to buy any land from us. We won't hold back from you anything because you've been good to us and good for us. If Abraham's being blessed, so are the people around him. They're going to be blessed as well. So here I think probably Abimelech is going to realize this, but that ugly little green-eyed monster is going to have to rear his head here, isn't he? Look what it says. The man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great, for he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. There we go. You see what that does? We don't realize just how terrible a sin this is. Envy is one of the worst. In fact, it's one of the sins specifically mentioned for the reason Jesus went to the cross. Remember what Pilate says? He knew that the Jews had delivered him for what? Envy. They envied him. Oh yeah, they hated him too. Well, that's obvious. They hated him. They wanted to put him to death. But it specifically says that they envied him. Okay, well, the Philistines envied Isaac here. Here he is in their land, and he's making himself wealthy on their land. He's sojourning in their land, and they're jealous of him. So they start doing some nasty things to him. All right? For all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth. Any good reason for doing that at all? Filling up wells that have been dug? That's hard work, isn't it? Digging a well. Is there any positive benefit to filling these wells up? Right. That hurts the Philistines too, doesn't it? That's kind of the old saying, cutting your nose off in spite of your face. Probably not. They envied Isaac, and that blinded them to what they were doing. They filled up all the wells. They stopped them up so that nobody could use them. Well, okay, Isaac can't use them. Neither can they. They can't use them either. So, you've got a land that is not 100% of the time flowing with streams all the time. That's the Middle East to this day. It's not that way. The land of Canaan is not that way. In the spring it is, and in the winter it is, but in the dead of summer, the heat of summer, it's hot, it's arid. So you've got to have a source of water, don't you? And the only way to do that, you have to dig. You have to dig a well. Well, they had stopped up all the wells that Abraham had dug at that time. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. So Abimelech gives him the command, a little differently than the first Abimelech did. Abraham was told, here's the land before you, here's all my land, dwell where it pleases you. Isaac, we want you to get away from us. You're too great. You're mightier than we are. You're bigger, richer, stronger than we are. We want you to move away from us. And it may have been because of the complaints of the Philistines, the stopping up of the wells, in order to encourage this. They're complaining to Abimelech, this guy's using up all our resources. We need to get him out of here. And so Abimelech maybe caves to their pressure. But for whatever the reason, Abimelech tells Isaac to go. And Isaac departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of Ghirar and dwelt there. He was living a little bit closer, still in the same area, but he was living a lot closer to Abimelech and the Philistines. Now he's gone down into the valley or the brook of Ghirar. All right, so this is in the lower lands. And Isaac digged again the wells of water which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham, and he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. Okay, that sounds good. He knew where these wells were, probably had been to them in the past while Abraham was still living, and he was a lot younger before he was married. So he knew where they were, and so he decided, I'll just dig these wells. They would have been very familiar with the locations. And it was obvious that they'd been filled up again with dirt. And Isaac's servants digged in the valley and found there a well of springing water. And the herdmen of Ghirar did strive with Isaac's herdmen, saying, the water is ours. He called the name of the well Esek, because they strove with him. Esek means contention or striving. All right. So there's the first well. The Philistines had filled them up. Now the herdsmen come after Isaac does all the work, digs all the wells up, him and his men, dig the well out, and now there's water, a springing well of water to feed his flocks and herds. Well, the other herdsmen of Ghirar find out about it. They come to water their animals, and they say, this is our water, get away. Well, that's easy to do after he dug the well for you. Now, what Isaac does here is kind of interesting. Maybe Abraham would have done this. Maybe he wouldn't have. Maybe he'd have gone straight to Abimelech and complained. I don't know. But Isaac doesn't fight for the well. I sense a little different disposition in Isaac. It's not that he's weak-kneed. It's just that he's a little more laid back. Okay? And again, I'm reminded of that saying that Ghirar brings out, that God tempers the wind toward the shorn lamb. This might have been one, again, he told, don't go down into Egypt, where Abraham was given the choice, and Jacob was even commanded to go to Egypt during the famine. God says, no, you stay here, I'll provide for you, I'll take care of you. And of course, that year he sows and gets 100-fold. But here he does not strive for the well. They're going to argue and fight over it. We'll go find another place, we'll dig another well. So that's what Isaac does. He calls the name of this one Esek, or contention. And they digged another well. And they strove for that one also. And he called the name of it Sitnah, which means hatred. Okay? So contention and hatred are the names of these two wells. These are all wells that had already been dug by Abraham, his father. And Isaac's digging them out again and cleaning them out so that they can be used. And the people of the land are using them and driving Isaac away. And he removed from thence and digged another well. And for that they strove not, and he called the name of it Rehoboth. And he said, for now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. So this basically, Rehoboth means room or space. So God has moved Isaac right where he wants him, by the wells. And Isaac doesn't fight back for the wells. This is their land. And, think about it. He is a sojourner, right? He doesn't own this land. He's just living there by them allowing him to live there. They're just kind of wandering around and going wherever the flocks and herds can be fed. So Isaac is here at this third well, finally. I think there's a valuable lesson in this. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We just have to, just back away, let the world do what it's going to do, and then go do what we have to do until we finally get to where God wants us to be. All right, so the name of this well is Rehoboth. And he went up from thence to Beersheba. So now he's kind of getting out of the land of Ghirar and away from Abimelech back to Beersheba. And the Lord appeared unto him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham thy father. Fear not, for I am with thee, and I will bless thee and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. Again, it all comes back to Abraham and what he did. One man, because of his faithfulness, because of his obedience, unswerving dedication to God, God made the promise that I'm not going to forsake the people until I bless the world by them. Does that mean that the children of Israel today are still the chosen people of God? They're not now. They were. Now there are people who believe, no, Israel's still the chosen people of God. Well, there's a spiritual Israel today, the church, they're the chosen people of God. But when the Jews rejected the very last of this blessing, and these shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, they rejected Christ. They rejected the Son of God. God rejected them. And while he gave them 40 years to repent, and some of them did, as a people, as a whole, they were destroyed. The temple was destroyed. The priesthood was destroyed. The religious leadership, Pharisees and the Sadducees, and all the other sects of the Jews were destroyed at that time. And they've never been able to rebuild since. So God put an end to that. Are there people who are descendants of them? Of course there are. But no one on this day can trace, they may claim to, but they really can't prove it. They can't trace their lineage back to Aaron. They can't trace their lineage back to Levi. They only know that, well, we are from Israel. But all of the tribes today, they've lost their distinctiveness. There is no distinction. And that's not the first time that's happened. Remember, the southern kingdom of Judah consisted of Judah and Benjamin, right? Where did Simeon go? Simeon was a small portion of Judah, wasn't it? All right, it had one of the smaller tribes, and it was given a portion of land within, surrounded by Judah, basically. What happened way back in the Old Testament, way before New Testament times? No more tribe of Simeon. Why? Just got absorbed into Judah and lost its distinction as a tribe. That's all. No malevolence there. They just quit being recognized as Simeonites. They became Judeans. Okay, they became of the tribe of Judah. Benjamin pretty much the same way. And although people could trace their lineage back to Simeon for a long time after that, they still identified as Jews. Same thing is true of Benjamin. Paul said he was a Jew, didn't he? And that has a reference to Judah, right? But he was also of the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, so we knew that. But the distinction between these tribes became very blurry until it became even non-existent. So no more real distinctions between them. Okay, let's see. Where did we leave off here? Okay, verse 25. And he builded an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord, pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants digged a well. So he's up in Beersheba. He has to dig a well. Is it the same well, Beersheba? We don't know. Maybe it was the same place. Maybe it was at a different location. Then Abimelech went to him from Ghirar, and Ahuzath, one of his friends, and Phicol, the chief captain of his army. Again, this same Phicol that we read about before, maybe not. Maybe it's just a title. And Isaac said unto them, Wherefore come ye to me, seeing ye hate me, and have sent me away from you? Why did you come here? Why are you chasing me down? Now notice what verse 28 says. The Philistines might have been envious of Isaac, but Abimelech realized that there was blessings to be had by being close in proximity to Isaac. And they said, We saw certainly that the Lord was with thee, and we said, Let there be now an oath betwixt us, even betwixt us and thee, and let us make a covenant with thee, that thou wilt do us no hurt, as we have not touched thee, and as we have not done unto thee nothing but good, and have sent thee away in peace. Thou art now blessed of the Lord. And he made them a feast, and they did eat and drink. So again, kind of like in the days of Abraham, Abimelech realizes that, hey, we better stay on the good side of this man because God's with him. He's being blessed by the Lord. Now, that being the case, they're going to do what they can to get along with him the best they can. So he makes a feast for them. They did eat and drink. And they rose up betimes in the morning and sware one to another, and Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. So it's kind of an uneasy peace this time, more so than it was in the days of Abraham. You remember Abraham talked about the well that he had dug and said, This is my well, but your servants have not allowed me to be at this well. And so he gave him the 7 ewe lambs, and the well was returned to him. And the ewe lambs were a sign, a witness that Abraham dug this well. So it belongs to him. I would imagine if you dig a well, it should belong to you by the virtue of the fact of how hard it is to dig a well, right? Well, that's not the way they treated Isaac. So you can already see that it's deteriorating, that the Philistines are not as nice as they were in Abraham's day. They're not as nice to Isaac. Well, they're going to get much, much worse. Why do you suppose that is? We see Abimelech here as having some fear of God. You can see that. We know the Lord's with you. We know, and of course, the Lord is all capital letters here, isn't it? Abraham and Isaac were blessed by Jehovah God, and Abimelech has some knowledge of Jehovah God. That's not going to be the case for much longer. And the farther away from God they get, the more wicked they're going to become. Any surprise there? How about today? No surprise, is there? The farther away you get from God, the more wicked you're going to become. You're going to just about do anything. The Philistines become very wicked because apparently this knowledge of God, this respect for God, is decreasing with each passing generation until it comes to the point where they're going to be a very wicked people indeed. Okay? It came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came and told him concerning the well which they had digged, and they said unto him, We have found water, and he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of the city is Beersheba unto this day. So whether this is the same well that Abraham dug or whether it's another well, they called it Sheba or Beersheba unto this day, the well of the swearing. Again, why would he call it the well of the swearing now? They made an oath here, just like they did in Abraham's day. So again, this is going to be the reason for that. Same well, identical well that Abraham dug, we don't know, but it's somewhere in that general vicinity. And the city itself, not just the well, but the city is going to be called Beersheba. Okay, now to shift gears a little bit, verse 34. And Esau was 40 years old when he took to wife Judith, the daughter of Biri the Hittite, and Bashamath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. Okay, so Esau has a thing for Hittite girls, doesn't he? All right, so he marries these two people in the land of Canaan. You remember Abraham went to great lengths to make sure that Isaac did not take a wife out of the land of Canaan and send his servant up into Padan Aram in order to find a wife from his own kinsman. Well, Esau is the kind of a man that just pretty much does what he wants to do when he wants to do it. It cost him the birthright, didn't it? We read about that in the last chapter. How did Isaac and Rebekah feel about this? Look at the next verse, which were a grief of mine unto Isaac and Rebekah. Here we have Esau is diverging. He's going, taking wives from the land of Canaan. Not just one, he's taking two. Now Jacob's going to take two wives as well, as we're going to read later on, but it's because he's deceived into it, he's tricked into it. That's why he takes two wives, doesn't he? All right. But, again, this was practiced. God records this in the scriptures. Does that mean God approves of it? He's just telling the history of what happened here. He's not saying that this is the way we should practice it, that a man ought to have two wives or more than one wife, or that a woman ought to have more than one husband. In fact, when Jesus is approached with the question of divorce and remarriage, in the days of Jesus, they didn't do that. They didn't practice polygamy or polygamy in either way. They didn't do that. All right, so they were only concerned about divorce and remarriage. And in Matthew 19, when they ask him, is it lawful to put away your wife for any reason, what does Jesus say? He doesn't use this example here, does he? Not here in Genesis 26 or 27. He goes clear back to Genesis 3, doesn't he? He goes back to Genesis 2, Genesis 3. It says this is how God meant for it from the beginning. God created him in the beginning and said, male and female. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave unto his wives. And they two, not 4 or 5, they two shall be one flesh. That's God's will. That's the way it's supposed to be. All right. Today we get some different ideas, but that's not the way God intended it from the very beginning. Okay, now in chapter 27, verse 1, and it came to pass when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau, his eldest son, and said unto him, my son. And he said unto him, behold, here am I. It's a little like Abraham here, isn't he? Abraham used to say that a lot. And somebody say, Abraham, here I am. It's kind of like that. About every time the Lord would call on him, he'd say, here am I. Or somebody else would call him. Isaac said, Father, here I am, my son. All right. So it's just kind of the way, the phraseology of the day, perhaps, and how it was handed down, perhaps, on his grandchildren. He had some influence on them as well. And he said, behold, now I am old, and I know not the day of my death. Boy, that's true, isn't it? How about us today? Do you know the day of your death? We don't know. I know. I don't want to know either, really. We don't know whether that day of our death might be today. You don't want to think of that, do you? The day of our death might be 20 years from now. How about Isaac? He does, I don't know the day of my death. It's coming on. It's getting close, really. And it is. It's getting closer for all of us, right? Was Isaac going to die imminently here? Ooh, a good many years later. At least 20, right? He's got a good 20 years left. And the reason we know that is because when Jacob goes off to Padan Aram, he's there for 20 years. And when he steals the blessing from Esau here, as you're going to see, he already took the birthright from him. Now he's going to receive the father's blessing, the best blessing, and that's going to make Esau mad enough to kill him. So they're going to send him away. Isaac and Rebekah are going to send him away to Laban. And he's going to be there for 20 years. And when Jacob returns to the land of Canaan, guess who's still living? See, we don't know. We're not in charge of that, are we? God's in charge of that. He's very, very strict about that. That's why we're not to take another man's life, are we? We're not to do that. Thou shalt not kill. Don't do murder. Now, you may have to defend yourself. If you do, you defend yourself and the life is taken that way. It's not because you chose to do it, but you had no choice. You see, that's a different situation. But to just indiscriminately take a life, get mad, get angry, and decide, I'm going to take a person's life, God takes that very personally. He takes it very personally. We're not to do that. It's God who decides the day of death. He said, now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out into the field and take me some venison. We would say venison meaning deer meat today, but whatever it was, wild game. Isaac liked the taste of the wild game. He wanted that. And so he tells Esau to go out in the field. Remember, Esau's the hairy man. He's also known as Red, but he's also an outdoorsman. He likes to hunt. All right, so we've got Esau going out to get wild game for his father, like he loves. Okay, we'll pick up there, Lord willing, on Wednesday evening in verse 4.